So, we're going to talk today about what I consider the basic blocking and tackling of cybersecurity. Okay, so I'm a big football fan, big blocking and tackling, X's and O's kind of guy, right? The idea behind this conversation that we're going to have, and I'm hoping it's a conversation, I hope people ask questions, that actually makes this a lot better. The idea is to basically learn how to build a security stack, layered security approach, or defense in depth with limited time, resources, and budget, which almost everybody out in the world has all three of those, right? A little bit about myself. I've been with Huntress for almost 2 years. Before that, I spent about a decade in managed services. I ran a roughly $100 million MSP from a sales and marketing standpoint. And then before that, I was at a regional MSP. So I've been in the IT space for roughly 15 years. This is kind of the three takeaways that I want you to leave with today. You're actively targeted. Everyone is actively targeted. It's not a surprise to anyone, I don't think. We help a lot of organizations from a proactive hunting of attackers. So we use threat hunters on that side of things. I can talk about that. I won't talk about it a lot in this presentation. This is not a sales presentation, this is education. And then I want everyone here, if you don't have a technology partner in some form or fashion, you should get one. You should never try to do all of this on your own. Find somebody that you trust, find somebody that you can actually have conversations with, and really sit down and talk through how to solve some of the problems that we're going to go through. So, this is usually pre-populated. So you'll see all of these, these are the big things in the news, right? Like all of the big ransomware attacks, all of the big things that are happening. The reality is that this is a very, very, very small number of the actual attacks that are happening in the world. You see them because they are big numbers, right? But the reality is Manchester United Football Club was hacked. Okay, you see that in the news. What you don't see in the news is the thousands of organizations that get hacked every day that don't show up here. So if you look at ransomware attacks by company size, sub 1,000 organizations are roughly 80+% of attacks. It's not the big groups, it's the smaller ones. Anybody know why it's the smaller ones?
Because resources are constrained.
It's easier, right? If I'm Manchester United, I probably got all kinds of things. I spend millions and millions and millions of dollars a year on security. If I'm an SMB in this sub 1,000 space, I don't have that budget. I don't have the resources and I don't have the time to manage the products, even if I had them. You are an easy target. Any idea what the number one threat vector is for organizations this size?
People.
Yeah, phishing. People click on links, magically they're in the network. Super simple, right? Doesn't matter how many times you do phishing training, by the way. So if you look at ransomware attacks, this is basically the type of organization that is breached. And so what you'll see here is that there is no rhyme or reason. There is no special group that gets targeted a ton more than others. Professional services tends to be a big kind of conglomeration, so to say, of a bunch of different types of services. So what you'll see is it's pretty mixed up, right? Healthcare is a little bit more because of PHI. So, everybody in here, your job's really easy from my perspective, right? Just put a good stack together and you do it with limited resources and you do it with limited budget. So all you have to do is pick from a list like this, figure out exactly what you need from all of these things. You have to manage and maintain them, and you have to hire people that actually know how to manage and maintain them. Super simple, right? No, not at all. By the way, this is supposed to be an eye chart. This thing's ridiculous. It changes all the time. More and more vendors get put into it on a regular basis. So a lot of people ask, like, where do I start? Right? The big question is, where do I start? How do I start with security? What do I do? From my perspective, I always like to use NIST, Cybersecurity Framework. If you're not familiar with NIST, you should go check it out. It is a really good resource to tell you at least the foundational components of a good stack. Specifically, NIST Cybersecurity Framework. So NIST is a lot bigger kind of entity than just CSF. But what you'll see here is they have 5 pillars: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Each one has different technologies inside of those pillars, right? Asset management, SIM solutions, AV, next-gen AV, firewalls, all the way through. Anybody here using honeypots or sandbox environments or anything like that? Anyone? Not a lot do. They're really expensive. You stay away from them. So what you'll generally find is most organizations run something like this. You have some kind of basic asset management tool that gives you some understanding of what you have in the environment, as much as you can. And maybe you use AD for that, maybe you use something else, but you have an asset management. Most of your budget goes into protect, right? You try to stop attacks before they come in. The reality is attacks will get through. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So, you have all of your budget in protect, AV, next-gen AV, firewalls, DNS filtering, et cetera, et cetera. Detect and respond is generally a blank slate. And then you have some money in DR and backup. If something does get through, I'm going to restore, and hopefully my backups aren't ransomed at the same time. Some people ask questions about why that's the case. This is probably one of my favorite slides, and I can't take credit for this. Somebody else way smarter than me put this together. But what you'll find is as you move from the left of the NIST framework to the right of the NIST framework, it requires more people. The reason you have gaps on the right-hand side of this NIST framework is because it requires individuals with very specific skill sets that are very expensive. So, again, with limited budget, how do you handle something in detect and respond if you don't have the resources to actually manage the probably expensive solutions to take care of that? So, how do you protect yourself? How do you build a stack to take care of this? I'm going to talk about something real quick. This is something that is near and dear to my heart. Persistence is something that is the idea of sustaining in your environment through a reboot, right? So there's good persistence and there's bad persistence. Good persistence is something like your clock, right? Every time you reboot, clock is in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. It's always there. It is a persistent application or a persistent mechanism. It's always there. Most threat actors that are going to do long-term extraction or exfiltration are going to use persistence. They're going to find a way to stay in your environment for long periods of time, unidentified, specifically looking, watching, and understanding. They start to evaluate what they want to extract, and then they extract. Any idea how long a normal persistent attack takes? 6 months? Okay, anybody else?
1 month.
Month? Anybody else? 3 months? It's really close. It's 100 days. Any idea why 100 days?
I mean, you keep it backups. That's why we say 6 months.
Yep. So 100 days because backup rotations are usually 90 days. Some retain backups longer than that, but the thought is if you keep them for 6 months, if you have to restore 6 months back on data, your organization is going to be crippled anyway. So, in general, the average time is about 100 days of dwell time. They hang out until your backups are fully, we'll call it infected by persistence. Persistence is just something that sits in the registry and hangs out. So, forgive me for reading, but basically their job is to maintain their foothold on the systems, and they do that by replacing or hijacking legitimate code or adding startup code. Anybody understand or anybody aware of the MITRE attack framework? Anybody seen this? Okay. This is basically how attackers operate. Doesn't matter who, this is what they do. You can also call this the attacker journey. The idea is, and this is an eye chart too, but if you look at the top level is the tactic that they use. So initial access, execution, persistence, privilege escalation, defense evasion, all the way through to impact. And impact is you're in the news, data is gone, your backups are corrupted, whatever the case may be, right? That is their exit plan. So there's a couple of things that you can do. We look at persistence a lot because persistence is where most of them, in order to do the things to the right, persistence is something that they need to focus on to stay in your environment, to be able to do all of the other things like discovery and lateral movement and data collection. You can't do that in a, let's call it a smash and grab or a drive-by kind of concept of attacking, right? But there are plenty of other places that you can break the chain of attack. You can potentially break it at initial access so they don't get in. Not likely, but you can do that. You can do it at execution, you can do it at persistence. Again, privileged escalation is all about privileged access management. You know, I was joking earlier about the Active Directory information. That's privileged access, right? So every one of these pieces has its own component where you can stop attacks depending on how the attack is happening. So from my thought or my standpoint, I always ask these questions. Do you perform any proactive threat hunting in your environment today? Can any of you say you do that? Anyone? Yeah? Awesome. It's about the right percentage. If an attacker got past your preventive tools, do you have anything in place that is going to identify the threat before you had to resort to wiping and restoring? Anybody? Again, about the right percentage. How about security engineers? Do you have dedicated security resources on staff? No? Yeah? Yep. None of this is surprising to me, by the way. You guys are the majority. Does your team know how to quickly investigate and remediate all of the alerts created by all the security tools that you have? Probably not. Yeah, there you go. Resources, time. Have you had a security incident in the past 12 months? Yes. Yes? How do you know?
Just general alerts for email phishing attempts. Employees are being good about saying that it's a phishing attempt and clicking or calling me, and yeah, we don't do that.
Okay. This is one of the questions that is always a little scary for people because the reality is that if it gets past your prevention tools, most of the time people don't know that they've actually been breached. You could have been breached, could have had exfiltration or extraction and never known. So, you know, the reality of the space that we work in, we live in on a daily basis is we need to answer all of these questions. We have to figure this stuff out. How do you do it? How do you do it with not enough people? How do you do it with not enough time? And how do you do it with very, very limited budget? So I'm going to stop here for a second. And I want to see if we can go into some of those questions. How do we do that? How do we solve this problem? What do we do? Any thoughts?
Automate what we can.
Automation? Okay. It's possible. You get into AI and machine learning. What you missed there is contextual analysis from humans, which is unfortunate. Something that's definitely needed. But humans are expensive. What else? What else can we do?
Retire with the next person.
Somebody can do that. I can't do that. But I guess that's an option. It's not on my list of options, by the way. Maybe I need to add that one.
What you're saying is we all should become hackers.
Yeah. Well, if you come to Mike's presentation later, he will tell you why being a hacker is a better career choice than being a security analyst. So that's fun. What else? You guys deal with this every day?
Best thing you do is baseline.
Baseline?
Yeah. Get your baseline for input, output, throughput. Baseline for what your images look like. Baseline for everything that you've got. Look for an output.
Okay. So let's talk about baselining for a second. So how do you baseline?
So we have logs, log server. Again, if you don't have enough staff, it's going to be outrageous to keep track of. So
Yep.
there's some nice tools that you can get that you can set notifications that'll let you know when something's being targeted or something that's throwing out, and that way you're not spending a longer time digging through logs. You can look at it. I get reports daily that are just dumped into my email. I can look at it real quick and see if there's something that's an anomaly that didn't work.
Okay. Let me ask you a different question. What does a good security stack look like? What does a good defense in depth concept look like? Anybody? Do we need firewalls? Yeah. Yeah, we need firewalls. What about AV? AV? Is AV enough? EDR. Yeah. So instead of EDR, has anybody heard of MDR? MDR is managed detection and response versus endpoint detection. Concept there is you're using somebody else's threat hunters and support staff to take care of the stuff on the back end that comes from your EDR. I would say that is probably something that you should be looking for. Some kind of MDR solution or some kind of platform that has security analysts in the mix to help solve for this. But you have to do it with some kind of thought process towards budget, right? Because again, humans are expensive, not just for you. Humans are expensive for all of us. We have a human threat hunting team. They are our most expensive resource. So yeah, EDR, MDR. What else? Multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. Yeah. Really cheap way to protect your environment. Very easy to manage, very easy to set up. You can look at. I hate using vendor names, but I like KnowBe4 a lot. So things like KnowBe4 for phishing training, right?
You said earlier it doesn't matter how many times you train.
It doesn't. It doesn't. But if you can stop one person from clicking, it's one more threat vector that you have reduced. And then there's basic stuff that you can do too, right? Like privileged access management in Active Directory, setting up group policies effectively, right? Making sure that if you have RDP open, why is it open? Do you need it open? If you don't need it open, close it, right? You got port 3389 open, shut it down. But if you need it, make sure that only the people that need it have access to it. Credential management, right? Passwords rotations. There's all kinds of things that you can do from a maintenance and hygiene standpoint to make sure that you're protected as well. So not everything that we talk about is, I need to buy a product for this, or I need, a security specialist for that. You can do a lot of this stuff internally in your environment without requiring high-level resources to do the majority of it. Your system administrator, even if you're a team of one, you can go in, you can do some basic Microsoft training on Active Directory and get to a good point where you actually understand how to lock down your policies, how to give privileged access management, that kind of thing. All right, so I'm gonna stop reaching to you for a second. Quick recap. Security software by itself is not an answer. Don't go out and buy a solution that then needs to be managed and not have somebody to manage it. It does you no good. It's actually, in some cases, more of a liability than it is a positive thing to have in your environment. So if you're going to buy something, either A, make sure you're buying something that you can manage and maintain, and you have time to manage and maintain, or buy something that has a SOC component or a management component to it. You need someone with eyes on it. You need the contextual analysis of a human being looking at products. AI and machine learning is not enough. Goes into number 2, build a security stack that uses both tools and humans. That could be internal or external. Doesn't really matter. It's a lot more expensive to do it internally than it is to do it externally. There's plenty of SOC solutions out there. There's plenty of SIM solutions out there. Plenty of EDR and MDR solutions out there. There's lots of products that you can look at. Again, I can't stress this enough. Find a partner that you can work with that can help you with a security strategy. Find somebody that you trust in the market, or you could always, we do a ton of education in the community, whether you're a partner of ours or not. We talk about tradecraft, we talk about threat actors, we talk about security stack, we talk about 0 days, we talk about North Korea using Baby Shark in their new attack vectors, right? Like, we talk about all of this stuff. So maybe we're not a partner of yours, but you can still use us for information, right? We still put out a ton of information. One of our big focuses from a Huntress standpoint is leveling up the cybersecurity community in general. We go to Reddit, we talk about various things. We go to our blogs, we go to news outlets. You can follow us in all of those places. You can get information about things that are going on. If you have questions, you can always talk to us. You don't have to buy from us to have conversations. I'm happy to talk to people about things on a regular basis. But there's also managed service providers that are local that you can talk to. There are value-added resellers that you can talk to. There are professional services groups you can talk to. There are MSSPs that you can talk to. There are plenty of resources out in the market that you can have conversations with and start to figure out a security stack that fits a budget. So that is pretty much like the general gist or overview of conceptually how to build or what to build in a security stack. Again, I like to be a little bit more conversational. So what kind of questions do we have? What can I help with? Yeah?
If we can't afford, like, let's say, an EDR solution for the entire fleet of devices, is it an okay strategy to focus in on your not like a certain infrastructure as a first action, or would it become pointless?
So a lot of people do that. And a lot of people do that because the servers are your critical infrastructure. The problem is that the threats that are coming in are going to come through your end users for the most part. So from my perspective, I always look at the endpoint as being a critical component. So if you can't afford a full-blown EDR, there are kind of interim steps that you can look at to solve some of those endpoint detections, right? So for example, like we use the free version of Windows Defender as part of our managed antivirus solution. So you can manage Defender, I'm like hitting the mic at this point. You can manage Defender through our platform. So that is a free next-gen AV, one of the best next-gen AVs out there, but it's usually impossible to manage. So there are things like that that are out there that people are using really good products at a really, really inexpensive price point that can still cover everything that you need to cover. But yeah, I would endpoints are becoming more and more critical because those are the entry points, especially now that your edge is not your edge anymore, right? So what used to be before COVID, you had firewalls, people worked inside of the confines of whatever your business was, and great, I can set firewall rules, I can do all kinds of stuff. I can geofence, I can make sure that Russia's not talking to me, for example. How do I do that from somebody's house? And you, as an IT administrator, how do you tell somebody that they have to set their home network up a certain way? Can't do it. So you have to figure out a way to do endpoint protection at the device level and not at the network level. It's a good question. What else? No bad questions here, by the way. I'm here to help. Nobody? Everybody's up? Good.
So let's say, and I'm not going to name names of anybody who may be sitting in my chair right now.
Okay.
You've got your antivirus.
Yep.
And you've got your firewall, and you think you're doing all right. What's the number one thing you'd say I'd go home and I would check on it today? What's the single biggest source of pain you see on a district that's kind of base level stuff?
So if you're using an AV and you're using a firewall, I would be willing to wager you either have currently today or have had some kind of persistent attack in your environment that your AV is not caught. I'll bet you 20 that we would find something in that environment. AV by itself is not enough on the endpoint. Next gen AV, slightly better. MDR, EDR is where you need to be. If you start looking at like insurance requirements, insurance is actually a pretty good indicator of what you should be looking for, because they're trying to limit risk. So if you're looking at risk and risk tolerance, we looked at 5 of the major carriers recently. All of them require EDR. So if you throw AV in there, they might give you insurance. It's going to be at a higher premium. You can probably buy an EDR and MDR for the difference. But for you, I would say, some easy things you can do, AD through policy, going through and making sure that, password policies are set up correctly, make sure that people have access to only the things that they need access to, and then patching, make sure patching is up to date and is as effective as possible on a regular cadence. I know people tend to fall behind on patches, and then persistence is the other thing. Like I said, I would be willing to wager you have some form of persistence in your environment, either today or you have remnants in there.
Just to add to that, a lot of the school districts in Missouri have the same insurance provider, and they literally we insured our way through some of the stuff, and so they're actually slowly going bankrupt. So this fall, there's going to be a lot more rules, and the premiums are going to go quite a bit. So it's not a matter of if or when. Music's going to put additional conditions on your district if you don't do some of these things.
So, welcome to every insurance provider out there at this point. Every major carrier is saying EDR is going to be something that I'm looking for, period. So if you don't have an EDR, you're going to need one. Question is, how do you manage it? If you don't have an EDR, you go buy one. Say I buy a CrowdStrike or a SentinelOne or a Cylance or a Carbon Black or whatever. How do you maintain it? Do you have the resources in-house to maintain it? Likelihood, no. So then you have two options. You can either go hire somebody. I don't know about Missouri, but I'm from North Carolina. Finding security resources that are going to stay long-term, almost impossible. And you're paying them $150,000 a year, minimum. Can you afford that? Probably not. And that's only one person. What if they go on vacation? Right? Or those same products, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Carbon Black, Cylance, us, we all have humans in the mix. Some charge for those humans, some don't. But you would find somebody that has the humans that are part of it. But depending on the group that you're looking at, you could get up to $25 an endpoint per month. It's expensive. How do you justify that? Ours is slightly different. Again, I don't want us to go into sales pitch mode, but our MSRP for organizations, I think the max MSRP that we have is like $8, and then it goes down from there. We do full EDR capabilities, and we're a managed detection and response. So we do have the threat hunters on the back end, and we do all of the management on the back end. So when we deliver something to you, all you have is basically a one-click remediation of, here's the instance, this is what needs to be solved, click this green button, we do the remediation for you. So, yeah.
Just real quick, I'm looking at EDRs right now, and I think, we currently have the Captain for AV.
Okay.
And they sell EDRs too. Are they a piece of crap or like everything else? Just wondering if I should not even try it.
I'm being recorded.
I'll say it louder.
Camera on.
Let me just say there are tiers of EDR providers, and the people that are in the top tiers are going to be, I would like to say us, SentinelOne, CrowdStrikes, those kinds of groups are in that top tier. I would not consider McAfee in the top tier. Yeah.
What was the name of, you guys do NDR, right? Mm-hmm. And you just said price?
I said we're about we have a new price rollout coming in April, so the new price is going to be around $8 MSRP. So we base it on number of agents, so it depends on how many devices you have and all that good stuff. So the most you would ever pay is $8 an agent, but it goes down from there.
That's for NDR, not just
EDR. That's full, yeah. So our product was built initially to service the MSP space, so managed service providers that were selling into the S of the SMB, so the small businesses. So what we had to do was we wanted to give full threat hunting capabilities, but we needed to do it at a price point that small businesses could afford. So as we've gone up market, we've used that same, let's call it the same formula, to make sure that we can offer the same value that we've always been able to offer as we continue to roll out new products. Yeah.
And would you say your product can replace and tackle not ransomware, but malware and like other AV systems, or does it have to be paired with an AV?
No, I mean, if you're on a Windows device and you're using, like, you could use Defender. We put the management on top of Defender. Defender is one of the best next-gen AVs on the market. So we would do AV protection from the Defender standpoint, and then we would do process evaluation and insight from our, what we call process insight. So it's basically process initiation to destination. We see everything that happens from a process standpoint. So lateral movement, process execution, all of that kind of stuff. So if you think about like this minor framework, with process insights, we basically do everything at the top level, and command and control is one that we do a limited amount of, but we basically do everything else in this framework. And we have threat hunters on the back end that are doing it for you. So really all we deliver to you is a incident report that tells you exactly what's going on and gives you a one-click remediation. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let's go to the very basics of this.
Yes.
What devices do I need to have this on? Do they want everything? And I've got mostly in the shop, iPads and Chromebooks, PS5,
Okay. We today are Windows only. But outside of Q2, we will have Mac. We're using Mac and agents internally as it is, so we're just testing it right now. So Mac agents will be out in Q2 for us. There are other providers that also do Mac as well. So there's a couple of different options, but I would say any of your Mac devices, you definitely want something on. Chromebooks are a little bit different depending on how you use them. So if you're using like a virtual desktop, if you're using like, okay. So so are they logging into servers? Are they logging into applications?
They're just logging into Google period, and they have no email.
Okay. So Chromebooks are probably not something that I would worry about.
That'd be the same for our iPads.
Yeah.
It's just our little issues.
Yeah. So you're going to be looking for more like actual devices that are connecting to a network or connecting to something that is something that you want to protect, basically. Good questions. I like it.
Since you were basic, I'm trying to go basic. I'm trying to make a response form, what to do in case.
Yeah.
Where would you get that kind of stuff?
So you can talk to an incident response group. You can talk to some MSPs, have people on staff that can do that.
Have one generic one that
I wouldn't use a generic one, and the reason being, I've seen plenty of people do it. You can go and find them. Have you ever heard of like roundtable or tabletop exercises? Basically, so you're going to need to do something like that for an IR scenario. You need to sit down with all of the heads of different departments and actually sit down and say, what happens if this? If we get hit by ransomware, what happens if we get hit by a snowstorm and nobody can get into the network? How do we work? How do we continue to do what we need to do, right? Or is it important to do that? So you need to sit down with those people and actually literally go line by line. And there are generic forms that you can, that will kind of frame out what a tabletop exercise looks like, but you still need to do one with those key decision makers. Or you can have somebody come in and lead one. So the MSP that I used to work with, we had security and compliance people that literally would come in and sit down with you and walk your department heads or your key decision makers through a tabletop exercise, start to finish. What else? These are good questions. This is the reason that I like doing these. Presentation is one thing. Questions are better. What else? No? Everybody feel better? Worse?
Oh, it's always worse.
It's worse?
Always worse.
Man, I thought I gave some answers. I thought I gave you guys some things to think about.
That's the problem.
Oh, that's true. Well, you guys are always welcome to come. You can come talk to me. You can come talk to our sales reps. We're the least salesy sales group probably out there. We'll just talk to you about what you need to do. And then, if you have questions, you want to do trials, we do trials on our product as well. 21 days, unlimited devices. We cap it at 3 critical incidents though, just as an FYI. So if we have 3 critical incidents that we're going into and we're actually identifying and hunting for, we will stop there and say, we're not going to stop reporting on it. We'll keep telling you where the things are. We're not just going to leave you high and dry, but that's where your trial ends. So the worst one we've had is in the first 3 days we had I think it was 200 critical incidents that came through in one environment.
What size company?
They were about 500 endpoints, so they were actively being eaten by bad guys. So
If we were to do that trial,
yep.
and at the end of it, we decided that now's not the time to purchase it.
Yep.
Is there an easy way to pull that off?
One-click removal. Yep.
So you're gonna pass out cards so we can call somebody?
You gotta come talk to me at the booth. But yeah, I would say, again, you can come talk. I have my card, but I'm actually not a sales guy, so I do sales training for both our internal staff and our partners. So my job is just teaching. Yeah.
Is there usually a minimum number of devices
Yes.
a company would?
Yeah, it depends on how you purchase though. So if you purchase through a value-added reseller, there's a limited number, or there's a minimum number that you have to buy. If you buy through managed service providers, they usually don't have a minimum. So it just depends on how you're purchasing. And we can help you with that. If you don't have a partner that you work with from a security standpoint, we have partners all over the country that we could point you to and say, hey, this is one of our partners. They're already trained. They're already managing it. And they usually, if you look at a managed services provider, they usually roll in management on top of it as well. So, for a pretty nominal fee, they'll take care of managing the solution for you. And they usually have a full stack. So it's something like us. They may have Duo or something of that nature for multi-factor authentication. They may have OpenDNS or Umbrella for DNS filtering, which is also something that is, I would say, is kind of core. You need that, unless you're using a more advanced next-gen firewall, like Palo Alto or something of that nature. Fortinet does one as well. So anyway, they can kind of talk through the various iterations and usually have a full portfolio of products that they can not just sell you, but they can also help manage as well.
We like to do worst day or worst security incident you experienced with the attendees of the conference. What is there anything that sticks in your mind as hey, this maybe not even necessarily worst day or worst attack you've seen, but the most memorable thing you've come across?
This week?
Sure.
So the funny thing is, we're in front of almost every major security breach that's out there. So we were one of the first responders for Kaseya. We were one of the first responders for Baby Shark. We're one of the first responders for the Horizon View, Log4j. All of those vulnerabilities were huge. Print Nightmare was another one that came out. So we're in front of all of those. Every one of those, in some form or fashion, were horrific and not great for our partners. You know, Baby Shark is a advanced threat that is coming from a nation state. It's not good at all. You also have stuff that's out there that keeps coming back up, like Emotet. Emotet's polymorphic. It changes its signatures every, well, they've changed it recently, but I think it's every 8 hours they change their signature. So if you have something that is actually signature-based, it's probably going to get past your signature-based protection solution with no problem. Those things are scary. Log4j, everybody was using JavaScript or Java in some form or fashion. Log4j was a terrifying breach or vulnerability. Horizon was a big one too. Anybody that was using the Horizon VDI solution set had massive vulnerabilities. Print Nightmare was nasty because basically you could take literally any credential and turn it into a domain admin in minutes. Any idea how much it costs to buy a single cred online?
One single domain admin credit?
No, not even domain admin, just a normal user.
Is it
99 cents.
It's less than $1.
Okay.
Less than $1. So I could, for less than $1 with Print Nightmare, I could go out, I could get one user credential for your environment, and within a couple of minutes I could have domain access to your entire domain. I didn't think you were going to ask me this question. I mean, there's some pretty bad stuff out there. Yeah.
So somebody gets into the network or attacks you, forensics wise, like what strategies would you recommend to say, I know that we have to put it?
So there's a couple of different ways that people can do, well, in an attack there's a couple of stages. Usually it's clean. Clean usually comes with identifying patient 0 first. You need to figure out where patient 0 came from. You take it off the network so you can do analysis after the incident response. And then the kind of tried and true method that a lot of groups use now is it's called black, white, gray network segmentation. And so basically what you do is you are moving things from one network to the next as you clean them. So gray network is all about cleaning the devices that are on the gray network. So that's like your staging area for cleaning. So you literally like move things out of the infected network into the gray network, you clean it, and then you move it into the clean network. And you just do that for everything. And it is a massive undertaking. Anything else? I don't even know what time it is. I'm just talking.
So you got 10 minutes? Or
Got 10 minutes.
You're fine whenever you want.
Awesome. Any other questions? No? Anything fun you guys want to know? Anything fun you want to learn about security?
Here's a question. If you're using an EDR that does quarantine the device on the network, are you still doing the process of physically moving the VLAN to the gray network to remediate, or are you using a quarantine feature to remediate those clients with EDR before you bring it back on?
So usually quarantine means host isolation. So it's isolating the device. Depends on when it isolates the device. Generally speaking, by the time it actually figures out that the device needs to be isolated, you have lateral movement, which means that you So, hey, I isolated this host. I'm going to clean it. Oh shit, I got another one that popped up over here. Now I got to clean this one. Oh, again, you know. So you're like constantly trying to literally whack-a-mole all the way through your network. I would say if you see something like that, like for us, we do host isolation based on ransomware canaries. So as soon as one of our canaries pops, we start to do host isolation tasking. That isolates that specific host. It is an indicator for us to start hunting through the rest of the network. It is not a, hey, everything's good, everything's green, we're good to go because we isolated this host. That is just the indicator that we now need to go do thorough hunting.
Or to set them in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Band-Aid. You're stopping the bleeding on one device, you're not solving the problem.
Do you just do that with VLANs and access lists?
As far as segmentation goes for the IR, yeah, I mean usually usually you would create a separate VLAN for each one. So you would do
VLAN, not an access list, so that nobody can opt.
I mean you can use an access list, but it's not.
I mean, like you would do for routers, you know, these guys can only get to this. That.
Yeah, it's not necessary. Usually we're disconnecting the internet at the point where you do an IR, so it's not like it's calling out. So there's no, they call it C2, command and control. There's nothing to get its.
So you set the VLAN so it can't get to the internet?
We unplug the internet from the literally from the firewall.
I'm just talking about the network, where you go to the breaks, you know, where you clean this up.
Yeah, I know, but when we my point is when you do an IR, generally speaking, you're unplugging the internet, so there's no possible way of reinfection from a C2 standpoint. So you unplug the firewall, and then you create internal VLANs inside to separate your networks. So everything sits on the black VLAN to start with, which is the infected one. Then you move it to the gray VLAN, and then you move it to the white one. And sometimes you do physical segmentation instead. It just depends on the IR firm that you're using. By the way, we don't do IR, so just FYI. We have IR partners. But in my previous life, when we did IR, that's how it worked. And sometimes we did it on physical segmentation where we actually used different switches for different segmentation. Like literally physically unplugged one from a switch, plugged it into another switch, and did the remediation on a completely separate network. From your perspective, I would say anytime you think you are breached, you need to talk to an IR firm. I wouldn't try to do anything on your own. That's probably the biggest mistake that I've seen a lot of people make is they try to clean things on their own. When we go in, we usually either see existing persistence that's still there that didn't get cleaned up, or they didn't use the proper tools to remove everything. There's still something that's sitting out there lying dormant. There's a bunch of stuff that can get missed, so we always recommend IR in those scenarios. Anything else? No fun stuff? All right. Well, if you guys have any other questions, come by the booth. I think we have a couple of shirts left. You guys can have some shirts if you want some. But yeah, definitely come by the booth. We'll talk a little bit more. I'll actually give you a sales pitch if you want to hear one. We'll talk through what the product does, how it works, all that kind of stuff. Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.